I spent my entire professional life working as an insurance agent, evaluating other people's life expectancy risks for big companies. I was that heartless guy in a stiff suit who looked at your medical forms and decided how statistically profitable you were for our business. I knew all the mortality tables by heart, all the disease probabilities, and all the grim mathematical formulas of human existence. But in 2001, a young doctor looked at my own tests and said just one sentence made up of a few terrifying words. He made it crystal clear that I had about 6 months to pack my bags because of cancer in my lymph nodes. I am 107 years old right now. I am still drinking my morning coffee and I am living proof that statistics can sometimes just go straight to hell. I still have that exact same disease living inside me that was supposed to send me to the graveyard a quarter of a century ago. If you think your diagnosis is a final and irreversible death sentence, you really need to listen to the story of an old insurance man. That day in the doctor's office smelled like cheap antiseptic, old paper, and someone's undisguised despair. The doctor was a very young guy with a very serious face who had clearly rehearsed this tragic speech in front of a bathroom mirror. He drew some complicated diagrams on a piece of paper and explained that my lymph nodes had decided to go on a full scale strike against the rest of my body. My wife Mildred was sitting right next to me and squeezing my hand so hard that I actually lost feeling in my fingers. Mildred was always a woman of incredibly decisive action, so that very same evening she put our beloved house up for sale. She decided we needed to spend absolutely all our savings on my last great journey before I kicked the bucket for good. We sold our beautiful house with a huge garden for pennies and moved into a tiny rented apartment so I could die beautifully and without any debt. That young specialist gave me exactly 6 months to wrap up all my earthly affairs and say goodbye to my relatives. Exactly 25 years have passed since that gloomy Tuesday, and I am still walking this earth and paying my taxes. The first few years after that diagnosis felt like an endless, exhausting rehearsal for my own funeral. I actually believed that young kid in the white coat and started acting like a fragile crystal vase that was about to shatter into a million tiny pieces. Every single morning I woke up in a cold sweat and listened tensely to my body, expecting to find a brand new sign of the approaching end. I completely stopped drinking my favorite strong coffee because someone told Mildred that caffeine could speed up the destructive process. My son David started bringing me fresh blank forms for my will on a regular basis, and we filled them out with such incredible seriousness, like the fate of the whole world depended on it. I completely stopped living a normal life just so I wouldn't accidentally die at a highly inconvenient moment. This all consuming fear works like a very slow and sneaky poison that you swallow completely voluntarily every single morning. I honestly thought my constant physical exhaustion was a direct result of my severe illness, but I was actually just being drained by the round the clock expectation of death. I sat in my old armchair by the window for days on end, watching the cars go by, and felt like a bodiless ghost who had already left this noisy world a long time ago. My muscles started wasting away rapidly, not because a tumor was growing inside me, but simply because I absolutely refused to use them. My social life quickly shrank down to the size of a hospital room and rare visits from relatives who looked at me with poorly hidden pity. My old friend Walter came to visit me often, and we spent hours discussing nothing but our endless aches and upcoming medical procedures. Walter is 104 years old now, and he panics and runs to the doctor every time someone sneezes loudly on the next street over. He strictly follows absolutely every rule and prescription, and his daily life consists entirely of a complicated schedule for taking different colored pills. I looked at perpetually terrified Walter and thought that was exactly what the proper old age of a man with a terminal diagnosis was supposed to look like. The funniest and simultaneously most unbearably sad part was that my energetic Mildred passed away much earlier than I did. She burned through so much nervous energy organizing my perfect farewell to this world that her own heart simply could not handle the constant tension. After her sudden departure, I was left completely alone in that same cramped rented apartment, surrounded by boxes of unpacked things and a diagnosis that stubbornly refused to do its job. I missed a huge number of important moments in my son David's life because I was absolutely certain I wouldn't live to see the next family holiday. I was terrified of getting attached to my little granddaughter Emily, honestly believing I would cause her deep psychological trauma with my inevitable and rapid departure. The moment of my grand awakening did not come with a beautiful choir of angels or a sudden miraculous healing right in the doctor's office. It happened on the exact day I was rewriting my will for the 10th time alongside a heavily sighing David. I looked at the fresh date on that legal document and suddenly felt the absolute pitch black absurdity of everything happening around me right in my bones. 10 long years had already passed since the day I was officially given 6 months to live, and I was still sitting at a kitchen table signing these damn papers. I looked over at my son David, who was already starting to go noticeably gray and lose his hair, and I suddenly started laughing so loud I almost choked on my own false teeth. David looked at me with undisguised horror, probably thinking the cancer had finally reached my brain and completely robbed me of my sanity. But I was just laughing at myself, at our sold house, at the doctor with his serious face, and at the entire life insurance industry. I had given 10 of the best years of my remaining old age to ridiculous numbers on a piece of paper that turned out to be absolutely and catastrophically wrong. That very same evening, I pulled a can of normal caffeinated coffee out of the back cabinet and brewed myself the strongest cup I had tasted in a decade. I absolutely did not throw my medicines away or stop going to my regular checkups because I'm not some crazy cult member, but I permanently stopped letting animal fear decide what I was allowed to do today and what I was strictly forbidden from doing. 25 years have passed since that terrifying Tuesday, and I am still right here, drinking my strong coffee and laughing heartily at medical statistics. The first week of my new life, without constantly looking over my shoulder at death, felt like a long awaited release from a maximum security prison. I called the clinic and told them I was postponing my next visit because I was going on a long fishing trip with some former colleagues from the insurance business. The nurse on the other end of the line went silent for an absolute eternity before very hesitantly wishing me a good catch and telling me to be careful on the water. I drove out to the lake, sat in a wooden boat under the blazing sun, ate forbidden greasy sandwiches, and waited for my fragile body to immediately punish me for this unheard of arrogance. But by the end of that beautiful day, I only felt a pleasant muscle tiredness and the lingering smell of fresh fish on my wrinkled hands. A month later, my son David came to visit me with another batch of forms and literally froze in the doorway with his mouth hanging wide open. He was used to seeing me in old flannel pajamas, shuffling slowly from a creaky bed to the television with an expression of universal sorrow on my pale face. But that day I was standing in the middle of the kitchen in normal street clothes, listening loudly to old jazz and trying to fix a leaking water faucet all by myself. David cautiously asked if I needed to lie down and rest immediately, since my doctor had strictly forbidden me from doing any physical labor. I calmly told him that if this damn faucet wasn't fixed right now, the water would flood the neighbors downstairs long before my slow moving disease ever finished me off. By the third month of my new routine, I noticed some amazing changes that had absolutely nothing to do with medical indicators or laboratory test results. My old joints hurt exactly the same as they did before, and my cancer condition had not disappeared anywhere. It was still with me every single day. But I only started noticing this physical pain because I had finally started actively and happily using my body again. I joined a local amateur gardening club even though I no longer had my own garden after my late Mildred sold our house. I just helped other people dig in the damp dirt, grow massive tomatoes, and argue until we were hoarse about which organic fertilizers worked the best. 6 months later, I finally went in for a scheduled checkup with that exact same doctor who no longer looked like such a confident young specialist. He spent a very long time studying my new scans, frowning in confusion, taking his glasses off and putting them back on, trying to find some logical explanation for what was happening. The disease was right in its usual place, it hadn't gone anywhere, and it clearly had no intention of miraculously evaporating from my old system. But for some reason, it had stopped aggressively progressing at the terrifying speed predicted by all those thick medical textbooks sitting in his office. The doctor very carefully said the word remission, although his trembling voice held a whole lot more confusion than professional medical certainty. The years rolled on by, and my life slowly turned into one big, prolonged joke played on all the known laws of nature and medicine. My beloved granddaughter Emily grew up safely, successfully graduated from college, got married, and I was personally present for all those beautiful events, sitting right in the front row. I remember perfectly well how I danced a slow dance with her at her loud wedding, and she cried quietly into my shoulder from overwhelming happiness. If I had continued to obediently follow the rules of fear, I am absolutely guaranteed to have missed that day while sitting in my dark room waiting for the inevitable end. My body was relentlessly aging, loudly creaking, demanding constant repairs, and requiring the regular intake of many pills prescribed by my very confused doctor. But now I was taking these bitter pills solely so I could keep on living, instead of just using them to pitifully delay the date of my funeral. 25 years have passed since that day, and I am still right here helping grow other people's tomatoes and dancing at family parties. Of course, this long story is not made up entirely of cheerful victory marches and carelessly eating cherry pies on the weekends. A few years ago, when I had already passed the age of 103, a hospital scanner picked up some completely new dark spot during a routine checkup. My old friend Walter accidentally found out about this news and immediately started calling local funeral homes to ask about the current prices for study oak coffins. I sat out in the long, cold hallway of the clinic waiting for the results of an urgent biopsy, and I physically felt that exact same sticky fear from 20 years ago grabbing me by the throat again. In that minute, I really thought that they were finally right this time, and their original grim prediction had just been slightly delayed in transit. I thought my luck had finally run out, and now I would have to pay the price for all my arrogance over the last few decades. But then I looked closely at my shaking hands, thickly covered in age spots, remembered absolutely everything I had managed to do over these years, and I just laughed out loud. I was laughing at the unbelievable fact that at 103 years old, I was still afraid of dying from the thing that was guaranteed to kill me at 80. It was just another medical test that required a small change in my treatment, and I went through calmly because the alternative of giving up was incredibly boring. 25 years of constant surprises, and I am still right here, despite all the scary news spots on the hospital scanners. Early this morning, I woke up in my own bed, and my whole body hurt like a small truck had slowly run over me during the night. My 5-year-old great grandson Mason ran into my room with a loud shout, jumped right up onto the bed, and absolutely demanded that I read him a thick book about dinosaurs immediately. I carefully sat him on my bony knees, opened the bright book, and started roaring loudly like a real Tyrannosaurus. Even though my throat was terribly dry from my morning medicines, I look at this wonderful, energetic boy and I understand with absolute clarity that he only exists in my reality because I once decided to walk out of death's waiting room. My chronic disease still lives somewhere deep inside me. We are forced to share the same body, but it no longer pays the rent or sets the house rules. I know for a fact that you are looking at me through the screen right now and anxiously thinking about your own diagnosis that keeps you from sleeping peacefully at night. You have some kind of heavy chronic condition, some scary piece of paper from a serious doctor, and do not even try to tell me that isn't true. You are not scared to death of the disease itself. You are panicked by that terrifying word. You are afraid of the number they told you in that sterile white office. I am absolutely not telling you to throw your vital pills into the garbage can or to stop listening to the reasonable advice of your attending doctor. Modern medicine keeps our physical bodies functioning, and that is critically important, but only you yourself can keep your actual life feeling truly alive. You desperately need to stop dying long before your tired heart takes its very last beat in this reality. You absolutely do not need to wait for a miraculous and complete recovery to start planning interesting trips, meeting up with friends, or just remodeling your kitchen again. Give yourself at least 3 short months of normal life without this paralyzing animal fear, just as a brave experiment on your own common sense. Allow yourself to be more than just a terrified patient with a thick medical file and go back to being a normal person who just happens to have this unpleasant disease. My dear Mildred panicked and sold our beloved house 25 years ago so I could die beautifully without denying myself anything. 25 years have passed since then, and I am still right here,